I've always been drawn to the dusty recesses of old libraries, their musty smell and forgotten knowledge and endless sirens' call. As a historian specializing in ancient mysticism, I've spent years poring over yellowed texts and crumbling scrolls, seeking answers to questions that have haunted humanity for centuries. My name is Emilia Gray, and this is the story of how I stumbled upon the cursed tome of King Solomon. Growing up, I was always fascinated by the stories of Solomon's wisdom and power. The biblical account of his life reads like a fairy tale, from humble beginnings as a young prince to becoming one of the most powerful men in the ancient world. But it was the myths surrounding his curse that really captured my imagination. They say that Solomon made a pact with dark forces, trading his soul for unimaginable power and wealth. That anyone who read from his book of secrets would be consumed by madness and terror. I always thought these stories were mere fantasy, the product of superstitious minds trying to make sense of the unknown. But as I delved deeper into my research, I began to realize that there was more to Solomon's legend than met the eye. I've spent years tracking down every lead, every hint of evidence that might shed some light on the truth behind King Solomon's curse. And finally, after years of searching, I found it, a dusty old tome hidden away in a forgotten corner of a library deep in the heart of the city. The book itself was unassuming, bound in worn leather and adorned with strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the light. But it was the words within its pages that truly caught my attention, the secrets of Solomon's curse, waiting to be unlocked by someone brave or foolhardy enough to confront them. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I opened the book, the musty smell of old parchment wafting up to greet me. It was like stepping into a different world, one where the rules of reality no longer applied. And that's when I knew I had to start writing this story, to try and make sense of the horrors that lurked within those pages. I had been searching for weeks, poring over every map and guide I could find, trying to track down the location of this fabled library. They said it was hidden deep within the city's oldest quarter, a labyrinthine maze of narrow streets and crumbling buildings that seemed to stretch on forever. But finally, after days of navigating the winding alleys, I found myself standing in front of an unassuming door with a faded sign that read Bibliotheca Antiqua in rusty letters. The building itself was an old church, its stone walls covered in ivy and moss, the windows boarded up like empty eyes staring back at me. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay, but it was alive with an otherworldly energy that seemed to pulse through every molecule in the air. I had been warned about this place. People said it was cursed, that anyone who spent too much time within its walls would lose their mind or their soul. But I didn't believe it. I had to see it for myself. As I made my way deeper into the library, the silence seemed to grow thicker, like a physical presence that wrapped itself around me. The shelves stretched up to the ceiling, packed tightly with ancient texts and scrolls that seemed to whisper secrets in the flickering candlelight. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers over the spines of the books, feeling the weight of centuries of knowledge bearing down upon me. And then I saw it, a book bound in black leather, adorned with symbols that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. It was as if it had been waiting for me, its presence calling to me across the room. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my veins as I reached out to touch its cover, feeling a sudden sense of connection to this ancient tome that seemed to transcend time and space. As I delved deeper into the book, I became increasingly enthralled by the stories surrounding King Solomon. The The tales of his wisdom, power, and mysticism seemed to weave a spell around me, drawing me in with an otherworldly allure. I spent hours poring over the pages, devouring every word, every phrase, every symbol etched into the margins. The more I read, the more I became convinced that there was truth to these ancient myths, that Solomon had indeed made a pact with dark forces, trading his soul for unimaginable power and wealth. I saw it in the way he was described as a master of the occult, able to summon demons and command the very elements themselves. I read about his legendary wisdom, how he could solve any problem, no matter how complex or seemingly insurmountable. And I couldn't help but feel drawn to this enigmatic figure, this man who seemed to embody the contradictions of human nature, both wise and foolish, powerful and vulnerable. As the hours passed, the library grew darker, the shadows deepening into abyssal voids that seemed to swallow all light. But I didn't notice, too caught up in the world of Solomon's secrets as to be aware of my surroundings. The air seemed to thicken, becoming heavier with each passing moment, until it felt like I was breathing in the very essence of the book itself. And yet, despite the growing sense of unease that began to creep into my mind, I couldn't tear myself away from the pages. It was as if I had stumbled upon a doorway to another world, one where the laws of reality no longer applied, and I was eager to explore its depths. As I delved deeper into the book, I began to experience unsettling visions, fragments of images that seemed to flash before my eyes like snapshots in a mental camera. At first, they were small and fleeting, but soon grew larger and more vivid, until I could hardly ignore them. I saw Solomon standing on a mountaintop, surrounded by a halo of light that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. His eyes gleamed with an unnerving intensity as he raised his hands to the sky, summoning forth some unseen power. The vision shifted and rippled like a disturbed pond, until I saw him again, this time standing in a dark forest, surrounded by twisted trees that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. I began to feel a creeping sense of dread as these visions intensified, my mind struggling to reconcile the contradictions between them. Was Solomon a master of the occult, or was he cursed? Did he wield true power, or was it just an illusion? The visions grew more frequent and more vivid, until I felt like I was drowning in a sea of surreal images. I saw demons lurking in the shadows, their eyes glowing with an infernal light. I saw Solomon's face distorted and twisted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. I began to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake, if I should have left this book alone. But my curiosity kept me anchored, drawn back into the world of Solomon's secrets like a moth to flame. I knew that I had to uncover the truth behind these visions, no matter how unsettling they might be. As I sat there, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the library, I felt the air grow colder, as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel. The shadows seemed to deepen and twist, taking on lives of their own. And then I heard it, a faint whispering in my ear, like the soft rustle of pages turning. As I delved deeper into the book, I discovered the true nature of King Solomon's curse and its dark history. The more I read, the more I realized that I had been living in a state of ignorance, blissfully unaware of the horrors that lurked beneath the surface of this ancient legend. I learned that Solomon's pact with the devil was not just a myth, but a brutal reality that had cost him his soul. The demons he summoned were not just mere spirits, but malevolent entities that fed on human suffering and despair. And the treasures he accumulated were not just gold and jewels, but the souls of those who had made pacts with him like himself. But it was the final revelation that left me reeling. Solomon's curse was not just a personal affliction, but a curse that spread far beyond his own life. It was a cancer that infected entire cities, leaving destruction and despair in its wake. And those who had made pacts with him were doomed to suffer an eternity of torment and madness. I felt like I had stumbled upon a dark secret, one that was meant to remain hidden forever. But the more I read, the more I realized that I had no choice but to share this knowledge with others. I knew that if I could warn people about the dangers of Solomon's curse, perhaps they might be able to avoid the same fate as me. But as I closed the book and sat in silence, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord like living things. And then I heard a faint whispering in my ear once again. This time, it was not just a rustling of pages, but a soft voice that spoke a single word: "Welcome." As I delved deeper into the world of Solomon's curse, I knew that I had to take my research to the next level. I needed to gain access to the restricted section of the library, a place where ancient texts and artifacts were kept for safekeeping. The librarian, a woman with sunken eyes and a perpetual scowl, seemed to sense my intentions and watched me with an unnerving intensity. But I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I spent hours studying the cryptic symbols etched into the walls of the library, searching for a hidden key or password that would grant me access to the restricted section. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a small, almost imperceptible crack in the wall. It was a tiny crevice, barely large enough for a finger to fit through, but it was all I needed. I slipped my hand into the crevice and pulled myself forward, feeling a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. As I emerged on the other side, I found myself in a narrow corridor lined with shelves that stretched up to the ceiling, laden with ancient texts and artifacts that seemed to whisper secrets in the silence. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old parchment, and I could feel the weight of history bearing down upon me. I knew that I had finally achieved what I set out to do, but at what cost? The librarian's eyes seemed to bore into my soul as I approached her, and I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake by coming here. But it was too late now. I had seen the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. As I ventured deeper into the restricted section of the library, my eyes scanned the walls for any sign of hidden meaning. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old parchment, and I could feel the weight of history bearing down upon me. And then, I saw them cryptic symbols etched into the walls, seemingly at random. At first, they appeared to be just decorative flourishes, but as I drew closer, I realized that each symbol was actually a small, intricate drawing. There were crescent moons and stars, ancient runes and hieroglyphs, all woven together in a complex pattern that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I reached out a trembling hand to touch one of the symbols, feeling a sudden jolt of electricity run through my body. The symbol seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, and I could feel its power coursing through me like a river. Suddenly, the room was filled with visions, images of ancient civilizations, long-lost knowledge, and forbidden secrets. I saw Solomon himself, standing in front of a great stone door, adorned with even more complex symbols than those on the walls. He spoke to me in a voice that echoed in my mind, saying, "The key is hidden in plain sight. Look for the symbol that holds the answer." And then, everything went dark. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The symbols were still etched into the walls, but now they seemed different, as if they held a new meaning, one that only I could decipher. I slowly got to my feet, my head still spinning from the visions I had seen. As I looked around the room, I saw a figure standing in the shadows, watching me with an unnerving intensity. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with piercing green eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. She stepped forward, her movements fluid and calculated, and I could feel a shiver run down my spine as she approached me. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman smiled, an enigmatic smile that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "I am someone who knows the truth about the curse," she said, her voice low and husky. "I have knowledge that few others possess." She paused, studying me intently. "You are a seeker of truth, I sense. You want to know the secrets of the curse, but you don't know where to start." She reached out a hand and touched my forehead, and suddenly I was flooded with visions and images. I saw Solomon himself, standing in front of a great stone door adorned with ancient symbols. I saw the curse being cast, the power of the Ancient Ones unleashed upon the world, and I saw the key, hidden away for centuries, waiting to be found. "The key is not just a physical object," the woman said, her voice echoing in my mind. "It is a state of mind. You must first understand the nature of the curse, and then you will know where to look." She stepped back, her eyes glinting with mischief. "But be warned, the journey ahead will be fraught with danger. Are you prepared to face what lies within?" As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the curse, I began to feel an insatiable hunger for knowledge. The weight of Solomon's legacy pressed down upon me, and I became increasingly consumed by it. Every waking moment was spent poring over ancient texts, seeking answers to questions that had haunted humanity for centuries. My mind was a maelstrom of conflicting ideas as I struggled to comprehend the sheer scope of the curse's power. And yet, with each passing day, I felt myself becoming more and more entwined with the very fabric of the curse. It was as if the Ancient Ones themselves had taken up residence within me, whispering secrets in my ear and guiding my every move. The world around me began to warp and distort, taking on a surreal quality that was both alluring and terrifying. I felt like I was living in a dream, one that was rapidly spiraling out of control. And yet, I couldn't tear myself away. I was addicted to the weight of Solomon's curse, and it had become an integral part of me. I was no longer sure what was real and what was just a product of my own fevered imagination. The line between truth and madness had grown indistinct, and I was powerless to stop the downward spiral. As I sat in the dimly lit chamber, surrounded by dusty tomes and flickering candles, I felt a sense of presence that seemed to emanate from all around me. It was as if Solomon himself was watching over me, his eyes burning with an intensity that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. And then, in a voice that was barely audible, he spoke to me, saying, "You have become a part of me, mortal. You are now bound to my will, forever tied to the curse that I unleashed upon the world." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized the true extent of my involvement. I was no longer just a seeker of knowledge. I was a pawn in a much larger game, one that had been playing out for centuries. And with that realization came a sense of dread that threatened to consume me whole. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the curse, I began to feel my grip on reality start to slip. The weight of Solomon's legacy bore down upon me like a physical force, threatening to crush me beneath its heel. I tried to hold on to my sanity, but it was like grasping at sand. The harder I squeezed, the more it slipped through my fingers. I felt myself becoming increasingly detached from the world around me, as if I was floating above it all, watching events unfold with a sense of detachment. The lines between reality and fantasy began to blur, and I found myself questioning what was real and what was just a product of my own fevered imagination. I became convinced that I was being watched by unseen eyes, that the very walls of the chamber were closing in on me. And yet, despite the growing sense of unease, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to continue my research. It was as if I was driven by some deep-seated need to uncover the secrets of the curse, no matter the cost to my own sanity. As the days passed, my behavior became more and more erratic. I would spend hours staring at a single text, trying to decipher its meaning, only to find that it made no sense whatsoever. I began to experience vivid hallucinations, seeing visions of ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge floating before my eyes like specters. And then, there were the voices, whispers in the darkness, tempting me with promises of power and knowledge beyond anything I could ever have imagined. I knew that I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop myself. The curse had a hold on me, and it would not let go. I descended further into madness, my perceptions distorted and terrifying. The world around me became a twisted labyrinth of shadows and reflections, where nothing was as it seemed. I saw myself in every mirror, a multitude of versions staring back at me with vacant eyes and cruel smiles. The voices grew louder, a cacophony of whispers that threatened to consume my very soul. They spoke of forbidden knowledge, of secrets that defied human comprehension, of truths that would shatter the mind like delicate glass. I felt myself being pulled apart by unseen forces, my grip on reality tenuous at best. The text seemed to writhe and twist on the page, their words bleeding into a madman's scrawl. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within my own mind. The chamber itself began to change, its walls melting like wax as I stumbled through its twisted corridors. I saw visions of ancient rituals, of blood sacrifices and human sacrifices, of forbidden ceremonies that defied the laws of nature. I felt myself being drawn into a vortex of madness, with no way out except to surrender to the void. The voices grew silent, leaving only an oppressive stillness that seemed to suffocate me. And then in the darkness I heard a single word: "Welcome." It was a whisper, a soft caress on my ear, but it sent shivers down my spine. For I knew that I had reached the end of the line, the final destination of my descent into madness. And there, waiting for me, was the abyss. The protagonist uncovers a dark secret that will forever change their understanding of the world. As I stumbled through the twisted corridors of my own mind, I finally reached the end of the line. The abyss yawned open before me, a chasm of darkness that seemed to swallow all light and hope. And yet, even as I teetered on the edge of madness, I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of understanding that I had never experienced before. It was as if the universe itself had been revealed to me, in all its twisted glory. I saw the world for what it truly was, a vast, uncaring expanse of darkness and light, where meaning and purpose were mere illusions. And at the heart of this revelation, I found a single, terrible truth: that the world was not what it seemed, that the very fabric of reality was woven from threads of madness and despair, and that we were all just tiny, insignificant specks in an endless sea of darkness. I felt my mind reeling, my understanding of the world shattered like fragile glass. And yet, even as I stumbled backward through the wreckage, I knew that I had been forever changed. I had uncovered a secret that would haunt me for the rest of my days, a secret that would forever alter my understanding of the world. I emerged from the abyss with a newfound sense of clarity, a sense of purpose that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I knew that I would never be able to go back to the way things were before, that I had been irrevocably altered by the secrets that I had uncovered. And so, I stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever horrors and wonders lay ahead. For I knew that I was no longer the same person who had begun this journey of discovery, but a new creation, forged in the fire of madness and despair.